Hey, good morning.
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 I wasn't sure if I was supposed to sit down here. There was like a, woo. Oh yeah. I'm supposed to put it on the right microphone. That way I can speak in my normal voice, which is a good thing. Is it turned on already?
I'm waiting for you to finish.
I'm done. Let the futzing be done. Yeah. Well, I never actually sat here. Junpo used to do it from time to time, but I didn't. And Rasheen asked me when we were getting ready, well, should we have an orchid? Oh, how about that? It's a nice touch. So, what are we doing here? I was looking for an answer. Kai, what, you don't know?
I don't know what I'm doing here.
You don't know what you're doing here. See, you're ahead of the game. You started out ahead of the game. You said, what are you bringing? Confusion. Right? Anybody who says otherwise is not being completely honest, at least in my experience. Yeah. But so Rohatsu, let's say, is celebrating or honoring the awakening experience of the Buddha. Right? The awakening experience of the Buddha. And of course, how do we celebrate and honor that as a Zen community? Right? By trying to practice what we understand that he practiced. Right? And how powerful is that, right? According to the story, he sat there. Right? It's an interesting story, but he sat there. So isn't it quite remarkable that after all this time, 2,500 years, and so many people and all the different forms and schools of Buddhism, we still sit here. Huh? That must have been a pretty powerful experience. Is it for you? It certainly is for so-called me. Yeah. So in Zen, we honor this primarily with meditation practice. So there's all other kinds of forms. And because we participate in the Unitarian Fellowship in Ripon next week, a week from Sunday, I'm going to give some kind of talk or presentation about Bodhi Day, right? Called Rohatsu in Japanese, which has to do with the date and so on. Although originally this is, and in other places, it's celebrated not necessarily on December 8th. It's celebrated by the lunar calendar, which would have been the calendar in use in the East when this happened. But we do this by meditation practice, dhyana practice. And there's some important points of it. I wanted to say to you that I thought that I wondered if I should even talk after Soham's presentation in the orientation. Right? Should I even bother to talk? Because I thought that was spot on, really good, right? Really good. Now he has to go wash his mouth out with soap, right? Poisoned, but not really. And I think that's important. So part of what we do here is we say, don't wiggle, don't move. Well, and that's important, right? And don't look away, right? Present, paying attention, don't look away. Don't move. Ah. You know, I sat without moving a whole bunch over a couple of different retreats that were back to back one time. And the result of that is that I have sensory numbness in my right foot. Right? And it doesn't go away. It's constant. It never goes away. And so, and it was kind of a foolish thing. I'm a kind of a stiff guy caused by running and everything. And I used to stick a little cushion under my ankle as a way to kind of stop my legs from falling asleep. And that worked pretty well until I sat for like 4-hour periods and stuff like that. And that was too long. And I just sat through having my foot fall asleep for hours. And that's probably not good for you. I don't know, Vicara could tell us, but I think it's not good for you to do that. That's been my experience with it. And so I'm a little careful. So when my foot falls asleep, then I adjust my posture. What I want to say to you about our don't move instruction is you have to be careful with this. But if you're in excruciating pain, right, then move. But the point is then actually hands in gasho, make the adjustment to your posture that you need to make, and then come back to stillness. Because it's wiggling that is the problem, right? And excruciating pain is not the path to awakening. Right? It's just not. You can work on your posture. You know, if I ever have time to really practice yoga, I know that that will help me. My hips are quite tight from running, but that's not going to go away in any quick way. Right? So the important thing is don't wiggle. At one of my first retreats, the person who was Jiki hollered out at people in some people who were wiggling around in the Zendo. Invite a rat and 1,000 come to feast. That was Madhyana said that. I thought that's exactly how it is, right? So if you give in to the effort to try to make yourself perfectly comfortable and do away with every little twitch and difficulty, they're never ending. So don't do that. Don't do that. But don't look away. And part of what we're here to practice is the Buddha's middle way insight. So sometimes I don't know where the history ends, the true story, if we want to say that, and where the myth or mythopoetic or teaching story starts. But the story is that the Buddha was practicing extreme austerities, right? As a way of trying to realize no self, right? So this, in Jumbo, I think, had one of these statues of a Buddha with all the ribs showing and all of that. So that story is that he was living on 1 grain of rice a day. Now, that seems unlikely to me, and also likely that if you did try to live on 1 grain of rice a day, it wouldn't be long before you wouldn't be living. So, and I don't see how there can be enlightenment if you're not living. You can't. There's no awakening. Well, I don't know. As near as I can tell, there's no awakening if you're not living, right? Awakening here in this life. That's the Zen principle. Yeah. So he was practicing this extreme self-mortification as a way to try to find the way, right? As a path, like this is the path. And he was practicing it with I think it's 5 other guys. And then the story is that this gal from the village came to offer rice pudding at a shrine, and came across the Buddha on the way and thought that the compassionate thing to do was to offer the Buddha rice. And in the practice that he was doing with these 5 other guys, he was to have no truck. He was not to take extra food, and he was to have no truck with any girls, right? None. So he accepted the rice and ate it. Another part of that story that's sometimes told is that there was somehow some sound on the river that got him to think about a musical instrument. And so the lute, or their equivalent of a guitar. And the reflection was that if the strings on the guitar are too tight, it won't make any music. And if they're too loose, it won't make any music, right? So this is the metaphor of the middle way. So it's the same, right? So the story about the Buddha that we have is that he was, his every desire was indulged as an effort to stop him from having the strain in questioning that would result in his leaving the kingdom, disappointing his father and not being the king, not succeeding him as a king, but leaving the kingdom on a spiritual quest. So that story is that the Buddha was recognized as a so-called Chakravartin, which means wheel turner. Right? And one path of wheel turner is, king, being king, and another path of wheel turner is a spiritual master. And so there was a conspiracy to keep him. And it's interesting, in the book about Zen women, the gal, I can't pronounce her name correctly right now, but she says, think about the Buddha, with a harem, encouraged to, have lots of kind of like partying and sexual gratification, and what that means and how that gets us stuck. And also what that means kind of about the confusion in Buddhism that followed, that kind of put women in a secondhand place. That's a foolishness as far as I'm concerned, right? But I think that's an interesting perspective about how and why that has happened and kind of why it's confused. So, but not the basic teaching there that chasing after our desires is fraught, because they're never satisfied. And when you think, I don't know about you, but I can tell you from my experience, when I get something I really want, it doesn't last. So pretty soon I want more, or I want something different. That's the other thing. I get something I want, and instead of that actually satisfying me, I want something different then. Right? And I think in our modern life, which is like the life of kings not very long ago, and queens, right? In our modern life, it isn't that we don't ever have real suffering, because nobody escapes sickness, old age, and death, and our families don't, and all of that. But for the most part, we have amazingly indulged lives. I do. Right? Even though I'm the son of a rich house who walked away among the poor, I'll tell you that. But so unsatisfactoriness might be a better way to understand the second noble truth, right? Or the first noble, the first noble truth, unsatisfactoriness. Not always like deep suffering. Anyway, so the story about the Buddha is that chasing after desires and this fancy life in which all the needs were met and all of the pain in life was hidden was not satisfying. And particularly not when eventually he saw some of that, right? Particularly sickness, old age, and death, right? And that put him in a tailspin. But also then, this story about his awakening is that extreme austerity, self-mortification or self-abnegation is also not the way. The way is in the middle somehow. Right? That indulgence and self-abnegation or mortification are actually flip sides of the same coin. Right? So if you figure out how to stand the coin on edge on a regular, let me know. But that's what we're trying to do, right? So I'd like to, how am I doing? Oh, am I doing okay now? Do I have my sutra book here? There it is, there it is. I wanted to point out some things that we say about this story, how we talk about it. So in the awakening experience, one of the things that's common in these stories about the Buddha is that the Buddha awakened seeing the morning star after some period of meditation, after he took the rice pudding, right? Stopped practicing self-mortification. And there's different versions of this story. Some versions of the story is that the Buddha sat and didn't move for 49 days. I don't see how that can be true. It could be true that he had really deliberate meditation practice for 49 days. There are some versions of the story that say 6. I would say it might be possible to do that for 6 days. Actually, really, I mean, not the way we do it here with walking and all that stuff in between, but to actually be still and meditate for 6 days. But I can't see how it could be longer than that, right? I know I can't do that, or at least I don't believe I can do that. Yeah. Or fell off, right? That was part of the Bodhidharma story, except that there's, he seemed to walk afterwards. So, but the story is then that the Buddha had an awakening experience that morning, right? Seeing the morning star. And then another thing that happened there, I don't know if I'll quote it perfectly, but something like this: reached down and touched the earth and said, at this moment, I and all being are awake. Right? I and all being are awake. Now that's pretty interesting, right? So we're practicing no self. So this is this poem from the Mondo manual that's attributed to Basui. Lots of people say Basui, but I'm sure that's not right. It's Basui. And I'm sure I don't quite pronounce it right anyway, but I know it's not Sui. Who is hearing? Your physical being doesn't hear, nor does the void. And what does? Strive to find out. Put aside your rational intellect. Give up all techniques. Just get rid of the notion of self. So that's pretty interesting. But the question begins with who is hearing, right? So there's some hearing happening. What the heck is this? Right? And particularly, if we get rid of the notion of self, what is this? So that reverberates here, right? And it's in the Buddha's, at this moment, I and all being are awake, right? So it's a dangerous word, but the question is, what remains, right? Who is hearing? It's not any of this stuff. Strive to find out. Right? Really pay attention. Don't look away. And also, all through our practice, we're pointing at embodiment, right? And Soham mentioned this, right? Pay attention to what's happening in your body. Our practice is not from the neck up, and it's also not from the neck down, right? Somehow, right? Paying attention. So I'm going to read a couple other things that come out of our sutra book. You know, it's a big deal in our practice, the so-called mu koan or no koan. Jumbo reframed it, the no koan. Actually, it's the wu koan, right? But I'm looking for, I thought I wrote down the page number, but let's see if I find it anyway. This is in the sutra book. I think it's on page 44. Yeah. So at the end of a presentation about the so-called Wumangan, this is what Jumbo says. This no, kNOW, /NO is absolute. This no cuts through any conceptual attachment. What part of no do you not understand? So this is talking about cutting away, cutting away, cutting away. And then he says this no, kNOW, is beyond comprehension. This no in time, this NO in time becomes kNOW, and then yes. What the heck is that, right? We're talking about no self, no self, no self, and cutting away, cutting away, cutting away, empty, empty, right? Emptiness. And all of a sudden, this becomes yes. So I'm going to read a couple more things out of here, and then I'm going to see if there's any questions or anything you want to bring up. But one of the things that I think is very important in our practice, we are so, I think the whole thing that aroused in religion, that's called the atrial, in the atrial age, all these religions, Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, all of them came about kind of in about the same time. I want to tell you what I think it is. I think that the being present in the world, right, was not a problem before we started to have civilization and society. When we were hunter-gatherers, I don't think that was a problem because we lived close to the land, close to all of the nature, right? We were a part of it. And it doesn't mean that the fundamental cognitive capacity we had didn't exist then, it did, but we weren't stuck in it. So when we started to become so specialized, all different roles, we're divorced from that. I don't know about you, but if it came to it, I probably can't survive on my own. You know? And not, I mean, I can't survive on my own because I don't have the basic skills. Generally speaking, human beings can't anyway, right? We need to be in a small group that supports each other in some way. But I mean, I wouldn't have the skills to be a good member of such a group without all our modern crap. And so I think that started about 10,000 years ago as a student of anthropology and all of that. And that's where this is coming from. And so what's being pointed here is that our stuckness in an abstraction of the world that we live in, and it's very adaptive, it's necessary for us, it's extremely overlearned, and it's very difficult for us to give that up because we don't know any better. So the practice, the idea of shunyata, emptiness, is a medicine. It's saying, stop that, pay attention, pay attention. But emptiness is a medicine. And the great proponent of emptiness, most of you have heard me say this before, but I'm trying to say it in a different way today. The great proponent of emptiness, Nagarjuna, however you're supposed to pronounce that name, Nagarjuna, Nagarjuna, I don't know which. He said, those who make a thing of emptiness have an incurable sickness. Now, I don't quite believe that, because I think all of us who try to practice this, that's a stage we go through where we make a thing of emptiness. But the pointing out here is to not get stuck there. And it seems to me that Baswe, in saying, pay attention here, strive to find out, or Jumpo, who's saying no becomes yes, or I'm going to give you a couple others, Hakuin and Linji, that what they're saying is don't get stuck here. Continue to pay attention. And this is what Soham is talking about when he's saying faith, right? Faith is a positive. It's not a negative. It's not completely empty. Now, what it is probably not our everyday way of understanding things. And what Jumpo's saying is cut away, and find yes. This is what we're doing at Rohatsu. This is what the Buddha said, is at this moment, I and all being am awake. That is a positive statement, isn't it? Right? So, we got these things in a non-historical order here. Well, it's not necessarily a bummer, but it makes me slow. Here's what Lin Ji said, right? I'm going to take excerpts because we got 2 pages full. So at the bottom of the first page, he says, do you want to know who the Buddha is? Buddha is no other than the one who is at this moment right in front of me, listening to this talk on the Dharma. If you have no faith in yourselves, and therefore you are in quest of someone else somewhere outside, or something else, and what will you find, right? So if you have no faith in yourselves, and therefore you are in quest of someone else somewhere outside, what will you find? Nothing but words and names. However excellent, you will never reach the moving spirit in the Buddha or patriarch or matriarch. Make no mistake. And then there's more, but this is concluded this way. Just see for yourselves what is there. I can keep on talking forever. Each of you must strive for yourself. Take care of yourselves. And the people at Zen River here know I can keep talking. This is one of my favorites from Hakuin. Oh, I suppose I should read it and not pretend that I could just remember. The ogre outside shoves at the door. Right? So here we are trying to practice, right? Oh, it hurts. What? You know, I'd really like to go have a burger or whatever that is, right? The ogre outside shoves at the door. The ogre inside holds it fast, pouring sweat from head to foot, battling for their very lives, right? So the ogre inside, right? Our discipline, our determination, our faith. Fighting on through the night until the dawn appears and laughter fills the early light. They were friends from the start. Right? Somehow they found yes. So practice, right? Rohatsu. Practice with determination and with faith. Cutting away, cutting away, whatever your practice is, but not a despairing practice. So, anybody want to say anything, ask anything, or you just want to send me to wash my mouth out now? That includes you out there in the connected through the ether.
I have a kind of practical question.
Yes.
How do you deal with sleepiness? I'm on like 3 hours of sleep and I'm like hallucinating.
Well, hallucinating is kind of interesting, isn't it?
It certainly is.
You know, there's a knife's edge there, right? Between relaxation and attention. There's a knife's edge. Jupo used to say, pretend that something you desire, you know, your child or your beloved is you're holding by the hand over a cliff. I would say, sit up, breathe into your dantian, right? Sit up, breathe into your dantian, right? Open your eyes wider, right? Open your eyes wider, be energetically connected. Be present. Like this, especially if you're tired. But the other thing is, the Tibetans aren't quite as, we have these kiyosakus and we don't send anybody around to whack people without their permission. And on these short retreats, we don't send anybody around anyway. But part of the history and the background in Zen is like fierceness and determination, right? But the Tibetans, lots of them sleep, right? And there's sometimes people say, well, you know, if you're tired, fall asleep. What I'd say to you is, see if you can practice with that, you know, that raise that energy, right? Raise that energy from your dantian. Pay attention to the arising of energy through your spine. Open your eyes wide, right? And then try to make sure you sleep tonight. I think you work late, so that's part of it. But you know, I didn't sleep real well either. Like before these things, I often don't sleep very well. And but if I stay awake and pay attention, then I'll be good and tired tonight, and I'll sleep better. And so it'll be easier. And nobody's going to really whack you, but probably if Soham sees you nodding, he'll say something, and that'll help you wake up too.
Worse than the stick.
All right. Well, you should ring the bell. We get 5 more minutes to meditate. Thank you so much.